Welcome to Real Estate Investing Abundance, the show for busy, fulfilled professionals like you to learn how to develop financial independence built on solid, passive real estate investments. Now, here is your host, Dr. Alan Lomax.
Hello, enlightened investors. Happy to be back with you again today. I'm your host, Dr. Alan. I know you'll enjoy today's show, and I have a big ask that will only take a moment of your time. Ratings and reviews are the lifeblood of our podcast. To leave a review and a rating, iPhone or other Apple iOS device users, go to Apple Podcasts or iTunes. For all you non-Apple device users, go to podchasers.com. On either site, search for Real Estate Investing Abundance. Once you find us, leave both a review and a rating. Subscriptions are also vital to the show's success, so please be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. It's free to subscribe, and you can unsubscribe at any time.
Enlightened investors, no matter what our chosen profession may be, networking is a critical component for accomplishing our work-related and professional goals. Today, we explore with a master network builder how he went from no network to consistently raising $10 million in a few hours. Whitney Sewell is a seasoned real estate investor, podcast host, and philanthropist. He is CEO and founder of LifeBridge Capital, a multifamily syndication investment firm with 900 doors and $150 million in assets under management. Whitney, before we jump into network building, tell us about a formative experience that helped shape who you are today.
Alan, thank you so much. Pleasure to be on your show. The first thing that pops into my mind when you asked that question was my military background, spending a year in Iraq. That was definitely a time that shaped me in a big way. I grew up in a one stoplight town, a little bitty area, and at that time, or high school or before, you're just not exposed to a whole lot. You don't see just how big this world is, all the opportunities that are out there. But, going overseas really opened my eyes to many things. Unfortunately, not everyone in my squad made it home. And so I'm very thankful the Lord protected me and allowed me to come home. And that shaped me in a big way. And I say one thing, though, the military taught me, Alan, was to have a never give up mentality. And it's just not an option, obviously, to give up. When you're in combat, other people are depending on you. I mean, their lives are depending on you to perform. And so it's just not an option to give up. And I think that's helped me a lot as, becoming an entrepreneur and growing a business. And obviously there's not things that happen in our business that would even compare to the hard times in a situation like that. So it helps keep things in perspective, to say the least.
That is interesting. And let's explore that just a little bit more. I'd like to know how you were different before that experience and really what was transformational about that experience.
That's a great question. I think before that, I was just still a boy. I had done a lot. And experienced a lot. I mean, I'd been working from a very young age and didn't experience most of the normal teenage things that most people do or want to, just because I did. I started working at a very young age. And I think that kept me out of a lot of trouble, that most likely, and I'm thankful for that. But, having to go over there for a year, you're just doing things, seeing things that you never imagined you'd have to do in situations, that you couldn't imagine, before that. But it just helps you to see that, what you can do, what your body can do, what you can accomplish when you have to. Right. When you have to, and there's obviously relationships that are made that, that are just, it's very different, when you're in situations like that. And I just think coming back, I love just the structure and the discipline of the military. I didn't want to stay in active duty forever as a career. However, when I got home, I thought law enforcement was a great transition. And I transitioned into Kentucky State Police, and there were 1,200 applicants for 5 positions. I was blessed to have one of those. And I loved working the road as a police officer. But anyway, things changed pretty quickly, and I discovered that wasn't what was best. I'm happy to go into any of that. But I just think the military just helped me to see, there's a lot bigger world out there than where I grew up, and I can accomplish a lot more than I really had opened my eyes to.
So you went into the military straight out of high school, is that correct?
I did. I joined actually while I was still in high school, boot camp right after, and I was actually in the Guard. And so I, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer. However, I still had 2 years of active duty, even though I was in the Guard, just because we were activated and went overseas for a year.
Well, you were definitely just a boy. And so I'm sure that was very transformational. And I'm sure you saw a whole lot that people should never see, and have come through that and have had to deal with that and had to deal with tremendous loss. As you said, not all of your brothers came home, brothers and sisters came back with you. And that is a devastating experience for anyone at any age, but certainly at a young age of 18, 19 years of age. Very traumatic experiences there. Well, I'm glad you made it back. And then you went into law enforcement, but you didn't stay there very long. And you went into real estate at a pretty young age. When did you actually go into real estate?
So it was when I was in law enforcement. I loved working the road as a police officer, but my wife and I were married about a year into me being a police officer, and I would have done it for free the first couple of years. I really enjoyed it. However, after getting married, we just passed each other in the hallway the first whole year of marriage, and then it was like, okay, it's just not what's best, right? We wanted my wife to be able to stay at home when we had children, and it was going to be difficult on say 30, 35,000 a year, and that's me working lots of overtime, the worst schedule you can imagine. And we just, we just knew then that, okay, this is just not what is best. And this is about 2008 or 9 timeframe now. I knew nothing about real estate, wasn't exposed to real estate or investing growing up, even though that was a pretty significant time period for real estate. I didn't know any of that was happening. It didn't really affect my, $25,000, $30,000 a year salary. So I was looking for a way to supplement our income so my wife could stay at home. And that's where I found real estate. And I discovered that, hundreds of thousands of people and more had built wealth in real estate. And if all of them could do it, well, then I could probably do something in real estate. And so we purchased 2 triplexes in 2009 and made a ton of mistakes. Just learned a lot the hard way. We're self-managing. We were remodeling a home while we lived in it. While, on the worst schedule you can think of, as a police officer as well. My poor bride was doing dishes in the bathtub forever while I was trying to remodel the house. And it was quite the experience on a new marriage. But it was like 2009, we bought 2 triplexes, and it was our own university, just self-managing. And it was a mess to say the least. But, we didn't stop there. Thank the Lord. We did not stop there. But I soon became a federal agent at that time. I left state police, went federal, and that moved us to Virginia, where we still live now.
Well, I know exactly what you're talking about. There's a lot of glamour about remodeling, and people think that is so cool. And I have done that live-in while remodeling that you are talking about. What a mess. I did it once, I am never going to remodel a home or anything while I am living in it. Anyway, a very wonderful learning experience for you as well as it was for me as well. Well, one more question here. You really enjoyed law enforcement. What about law enforcement was so fulfilling and enjoyable?
I loved the service. I loved getting to a scene where somebody's had an accident, they need help, and I can get there and help them get out of the car. Or I can help the kids get out, or even give the kids a teddy bear at that moment when it's like the most stressful time for them. I love that part of it, just being a first responder. I love the uniform. I was very strict about, my uniform being as crisp and perfect as I could possibly make it. I would shine every button every day. And because I also knew that the uniform can save your life as a police officer. And most people don't know this. And if you're not in those situations, you wouldn't have any reason to know. But, professional bad guys, for lack of a better word, those guys, they know when they see the officer, they can judge them very quickly and know if they're a soft target or not. And if your uniform is crisp, your buttons are polished, and you look like you are what we call in the military squared away, they know they better watch out, or they know that you're not going to be a soft target. Even if they're bigger than you can probably handle yourself pretty well. You're prepared, at that time. But when they see you and you're slouchy and, your shirt's halfway untucked and your buttons are aren't taken care of. I mean, they look for those things. And so then they know you're an easy target. And so I just enjoyed that part of that career, or being a law enforcement officer. I loved working the road, just the service component, the camaraderie, with the other officers as well. It was a lot of fun at times, some difficult times as well, of course, but just the structure, the discipline, I enjoy those things.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. As an industry-leading, relationship-focused, design-build construction firm, Mosaic Construction has worked in many different asset classes from multifamily to retail, medical, industrial, and commercial. Mosaic Construction works to execute interior and exterior renovations with their team of trades and project managers. Their experience with value-add improvements has resulted in increased ROI and long-term value of the assets. They work nationally in partnership with local trades to deliver thoughtful, problem-solving construction management solutions to all their clients. For a personal, no-obligation consultation, call Ira Singer, 773-491-3145, or email Ira at mosaicconstruction.net. You can also find Ira on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and presentation, so important in so many things in life. Well, let's get into how you grew your network so rapidly. So start from the beginning. We want to start with that hiring process, which seems to be an important part there, or wherever you want to start.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Alan. And I'll go back a little further because there's some components there that I feel are very important as far as how I've grown rapidly, and even a missing component that most people I think don't talk about, and because everybody talks about this know, like, and trust, right? When you're talking to investors and you want them to know, like, and trust you, but I say there's something that's missing. But before we get there, don't let me forget that. But I'm going to go back a little bit because when my wife and I moved to Virginia, Alan, remember we were raised in that one stoplight town. I'd already been in the military. We'd been married maybe 2 to maybe 3 years at this point. And now we got to Roanoke, and went to this church. This pastor was talking about how they had adopted a child, and they were talking about how there was over 150 million orphans in the world, but how it can also cost, say, 40 to 60 grand to bring a child home through adoption. And we had never discussed adopting before, but on our way home from this event, my wife and I, Chelsea and I, were just like, well, why would we not? Like, why would we? It seems like the right thing to do. Why would we not adopt? It seemed that simple, and had no idea, the path that we were taking. And thankfully, but the Lord had different plans. And so within a week, we turned in our application to adopt from Ethiopia. 2 years later, our first son, Samuel, came home from Ethiopia. It's just a roller coaster of a process, but thankfully it turned out, but it did take 2 years. A year later, our second son, Elijah, came home through adoption. And then we also have a daughter now, Eden Joy, who is 2 years old, and she came to our family through adoption as well. And so those processes are very burdensome. They are a roller coaster, but I tell people they're very worth it, though. Very, so worth it, to bring your child home. But going through that obviously has changed our lives in a massive way, our family, but the financial burden keeps most families from adopting. And while they would be great parents, and there's just an extreme need, right, for parents or people to adopt children. I talk to couples all the time, and they say, Whitney, that's more than I make in a year, and so it just like stops them in their tracks. They don't even feel like they could even pursue it. So early on in our business, we committed to starting a foundation that would help these families with a financial burden. And we committed half of our personal profits to doing that. And so that was our mission. That was our why behind LifeBridge Capital, was the LifeBridge Foundation, which is now operating. But that kept my wife and I going through some very difficult times in starting this business. And we're happy to get into any of that. That was crucial. And what I didn't realize, though, too, when I started networking, I started meeting people, I would share about our mission, right? And I hadn't read, Simon Sinek's stuff or his book about your why and all that stuff at that time. I don't even know if it was out then. But what I started realizing is that I would share my mission. I would share people, you get to a conference and there's 200 people there, even if there's 25 people there, and you think about you're talking to 25 different people in a 2 or 3 hour time frame, or even if it's over a couple of days, a week later, how many people do you really remember? Especially if they're all talking about real estate. I mean, nobody stood out. Maybe one or two, maybe there's something you remember because you both connected, you and I, maybe about horses or something, but often you won't remember. many people. But what I started to realize, people say, Whitney, what do you do? And I would say, my wife and I are starting a foundation where we help families adopt children. And we do that through our commercial real estate business as well. We fund that through that from our personal profits. So our investors, get to make amazing returns, get the tax benefits, and they also help us in this, but it doesn't affect their returns at all. And so that's a very different conversation now. And so it's there's a surprise component, right? They didn't expect that. And so now they see a different side of me. They see something I'm passionate about outside of business, outside of real estate. We can talk about real estate next week or, when we talk again. Right now, you need to build that relationship and they need to see that different side of you. And like I said, I didn't plan it that way. The Lord had a different plan, but I started seeing that working. I started seeing that changing the dynamic of the conversation. And now they're asking questions about the foundation. They're asking questions about my family, about my children, our process of adoption, and then they're asking about, well, how is that connected to your real estate business and investors? And so now it's something that is memorable. It's something that stands out, right? Next week when I follow up with them, or hopefully sooner than that, but they remember that conversation, even if we're at a large conference. And so over time, that has helped in a big way. And what I say, yes, there's a big team component, and we can get into that, but that specifically is so crucial because building that, there's so many components to building that know, like, and trust. But what I say is missing is a loyalty component. And when an investor or anyone, so investors and even your team want to be a part of something bigger than just money. Some think they just want the money, but ultimately they eventually see that they want something more than just a money component, right? Or there's lots of operators they can invest with, lots of people that your team could even go work for to make money, maybe even more money than what you're able to pay them or returns you're able to provide. However, when there's this component that's bigger than that, they're so much more motivated. They're so much more on board when they can be a part of a mission, part of something bigger. And in our case, it's helping these families bring children home that need families. And our investors love that as well. But it's that loyalty component. It's a different connection altogether when it's something they can get behind, something they can be a part of, and then they can actually even see it happen. And they even want you to succeed then. They want you, like they'll even, hold their capital for your next project, even though maybe there's a different project that was offering higher projected returns, because they love that component, about you or about your business and what they can be a part of. So that's a big part of it, Alan. And I'm happy to go into any of that or get into the team component or processes or anything that helps us make that happen now.
Well, fabulous. And such a good point. And I don't know, in all of the networking books, articles, gurus, so on and so forth, I don't know that I've heard anyone put it in quite those same terms. And that aspect of loyalty is an important component, but it just seems to be under the surface in so many other discussions. And I can hear, as you're talking about that, I can hear how that passion for adoption comes through so loud and clear. And yet we haven't really even touched upon to any degree that those processes. You have mentioned the difficulties and the expense of adoption, but even without going into any of those details or that entire process, that whole passion for that thing just comes through loud and clear. And so I can see how that has helped tremendously in building your network. But that is wonderful, but there has to be some processes that have been put in place because, you can be the most passionate person in the world about your particular cause. And if nobody knows about that, and there's no mechanism for getting that out, then it's just going to stay under a bushel. If I know you're a Christian and you've probably sung that song about don't put your light under a bushel. So what are those processes? How did you bring all of that to life?
A big one is our podcast, Alan. It's a big thing. When we jumped from, so I had those triplexes, I got up to like a 15 unit. And another part of that story, right during that time after we moved to Roanoke, believe it or not, I was training horses professionally. I know you and I talked about horses a little bit, but I was doing clinics all over the country, and I was selling horses for more money than I ever imagined. It was a passion of mine since I was a little boy, right? You can probably relate. I was just loving that. But so I had the 15 unit. I was also a federal agent, and I still had full-time family pursuing adoption. I mean, it was quite crazy. And so I'd get off from the federal agent position, and then I would be training horses or giving lessons and riding till midnight most nights in the arena, and then just get up and do it all over again. And there was a time my wife and I, we were at the beach, we were just walking and praying and really having some thinking time and looking forward, thinking, okay, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, is this where we see ourselves, or where are we going? Things like that. And that was so helpful. But it was a major turning point. And we knew that we couldn't keep it up, and it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it, this kind of schedule that I had at the time. And because the horses were never going to, it was always going to require me to be there, training. Like, these people wanted me to train their horses. I couldn't have, all these other people doing it, and so it was never going to be passive. And so what happened, Alan, was we had the farm we'd always dreamed of, the house, and my wife and I came home, and this was like August, September timeframe, and we decided to sell everything. And so we sold the farm. I mean, by Christmas, or between Christmas and New Year's, we were moving out of our farm. And so we had decided that commercial real estate was the path, and that was going to build wealth. That was going to help us have more passive income. And that we knew that if we were successful, that we could have horses again one day. But I sold everything. Sold some of all the horses, the best horses I'd ever had or trained. And they, that was a sad day for us. My wife and I talked about that day, and just crying. We were leaving the driveway and just bawling. And that was so difficult for us. However, we knew our mission, and we knew it wasn't going to be forever. And that was only the beginning of our commercial real estate business. And so at that time, though, I hired a mentor, and I started learning as much about the commercial real estate and syndication business as I possibly could. I started networking, going to conferences. And again, I started seeing guys and gals who were buying 100-unit complexes who had only been in the business a year or two. I never thought that I would be able to do that, or I thought it'd be 20, 30 years from now. And I started, my eyes were open. I started seeing these other people that had done it. And I thought, okay, if they can do it, I can do it as well. And so quickly, though, I started our podcast, the daily, the Real Estate Syndication Show. It's 7 days a week. And we've done over 1,000 interviews now. And, doing that made me put systems in place, Alan, that I'd never imagined having before. So I was working full time. We'd bought a small house in town. I put an office in this basement, Alan, and that is where I lived for 2 years, in this basement, in this little office. And it was such an intense time. And so I would be in there from 5 to 7 in the morning before my federal agent position. And then right after that, I'd get home, I'd be back in there till 10 or midnight most nights. I had 2 days off a month, Alan, or every other Monday. And my team, so I built a team before we ever launched the podcast, keeping up with a daily show. I knew that I couldn't do all that. I had to have good systems. I had to have a good team. And so those 2 days off a month we called it my marathon day. And my team knew that I had to record at least 12 to 15 interviews back to back to back to back to back on those days. And so that's what I would do. I would stand behind a desk and record, 12 to 15 interviews those days every month. And sometimes, in the afternoons as well throughout the week. But it caused us to get really good at systems. I didn't have time to, prepare every guest before every interview, right? I had to get really good at our system and making sure the guests are prepared and making sure our team knew to have that many guests, prepared for me to interview back to back to back. And then even just the process of putting out a daily show, they had to get really good at that. And so we had 60 shows, ready to go before we ever launched. And I wanted that buffer, right? Because I knew there was going to be hiccups. I knew there was going to be a learning curve. But that it pushed me to scale in ways that I never imagined. I've personally never edited the first piece of audio or video, and don't want to, and I couldn't do it. And it's just not what I'm best at. But we had a team, to do that. And they had specific skill sets, that I needed to make that happen. And now that's grown into lots of things. Now we have what I call Class A talent, even in our executive assistants, that are very good at what they do. Even my investor relations person is very talented just at communicating and working with investors and just that administration process, even to our podcast and marketing production team and all that now. So all that's changed a lot over the last few years there. It's grown and gotten better. But it did start with really what I call overcommitting. If I hadn't committed to that 7-day-a-week podcast, I would not have, met as many people, right? I would not have built those systems and processes. And I tell people, if I had done a weekly podcast in the beginning, I would have personally tried to have done everything. I would have done the audio and the video and pushed myself to try to do that. It would have been halfway done. I probably would have gotten frustrated and quit, But by building that team, like they're depending on me then too, right, to perform. And so I just kept going, and I just saw it as, if this is what it takes, like let's just see how to get it done, right? Don't tell me how hard it's going to be. Let's not focus on that. That's not helpful. Like let's just see how to get it done. And that's what helped me so much in the beginning to start to build those systems and processes.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Would you ever invest all your money in a single stock? Very unlikely. Yet investors are willing to risk $50,000 to $100,000 in a single property in real estate all the time. Avestor is the world's first customizable real estate investment platform. Investors can build their own custom portfolios selecting investments across multiple asset classes such as single-family homes, multifamily, student housing, self-storage, and shopping centers. You can also invest across multiple markets and different time frames. Avestor also enables other real estate entrepreneurs and syndicators to build and use Avestor's infrastructure and cloud platform to create their own customizable real estate funds. To learn more, visit us at avestorinc.com. Avestor, real estate investing made simple.
So I am assuming that the sale of the property, the horses, and all of the triplexes and 15 plex and all of that funded those first team members. Is that correct? Or
they did fund some of it, I would say. And we were, at that time too, I was looking at hiring a mentor. We were just starting our third adoption process. And we knew that was going to be another 40 to 50, 60,000, and my wife and I at the time, we didn't have that kind of money. And so we really contemplated, like, should we spend this money on a mentorship? Is that the best? Now it's a no brainer. It's been so fruitful. It's so worthwhile. However, if you've never had really any kind of money to amount to anything, spending that much money, that was like, I don't know if we should do this or not. But it did, selling those, did help us, just having some confidence that we could move forward for at least a period of time.
Well, you said that was difficult. It funded some of that, but you said that wasn't all there was to it. What was the other component other than just the funding component?
Of just the difficulty?
Well, the forming of the team, you said that that it wasn't altogether a funding process. What was the other way that you formed the team?
I mean, at that time, it was mostly marketing, podcast production, right? Finding virtual assistants. And I had to get good at hiring virtual assistants. And these were there were 4 people from all over the world, different countries, different time zones, and they had unique skill sets. And I also had an assistant at that time that was helping me manage all those people, right? And manage, helping me ensure that all that gets done. And this assistant in the very beginning helped me, I think, 2 hours a week for the first month. And then I needed more than that. We quickly went to like 4 to 8 hours a week. And then she couldn't, she was working for other people at the same time too. So I had to find somebody else. And that's been a growing experience, up to where we're at now. But I think there's so many things that are learned there in how to hire, how to find, Class A talent. And now we can do that so much better than I knew how to do then. But even hiring virtual assistants and knowing that, you can find people that have specific skill sets that you don't have, and you don't have to learn that skill set. They'll do it better than you anyway, and pretty cheap, for the most part, depending on what that is you're needing. But I think that was a big component for me, learning that, hey, I can make these things happen. It doesn't all have to depend on me to get, to check every box. I can rely on these other people who have skill sets that I don't have time to develop in myself.
Yeah. So you had a team to start off with, and you were very careful about selecting that team. And you've mentioned mentor. How important was that mentor? What did the mentor contribute to all of that? There's a lot of mentors out there. Some good and some not so good.
So I often say, Alan, all mentors are not created equal, to say the least. Oh my goodness. You have to do some due diligence. And what I did, I'll tell you a few things that were important to me. At that time, I knew that I wanted somebody who was still in the business. Often there's people who were very successful in real estate, say many years ago, and then they just mentor. They kind of retire, but then they mentor, and they may be really good at it, but that just wasn't what I wanted. I wanted somebody that was in the business right now. And I also wanted somebody that I had direct access to. And so I didn't want to work with, say, a team of coaches under the main guru or whatever you want to call it. I wanted to have direct access with that person. And I also wanted to at least feel like, you don't know this in the beginning, but I at least wanted to feel like they genuinely cared about my success. Right? That they weren't just selling me on some program or something like that. That was very important to me. And so I started to do lots of research. Again, think about that time. It was a lot of money for my wife and I to spend, commit to, especially when we're fixing to commit to this third adoption process. And we're going to have that money, for that adoption to bring our child home. And so it was a lot. It was a big commitment. But I went on Bigger Pockets. I went in other places and I started started finding people that are in these other coaching programs and reaching out to them and saying, hey, what's your experience been? Are you willing to get on the phone and talk for a few minutes? That was so helpful, Alan, because many people would say, hey, don't do it. This is not the program, or I've had this, these problems, or whatever. And that was very helpful. I even went to conferences to meet these so-called gurus or mentors. And honestly, there's numerous that I would meet in person that I would say, okay, wait a minute. I just feel like I'm being sold. I don't feel like I'm just going to be a number to you. Right. And so I immediately could say, okay, that is not the one for me. Even though I knew many people at that point that were successful in their program, I just did not feel comfortable with them. But I did find somebody and I still did lots of checking on this person and had other references and talked to lots of people. And then I just went forward with it in a big way. And he met all these things that I told you about. And it was so crucial, Alan. So many times when you're in the business, you're bogged down with all these thoughts, ideas. It just gives you such another layer of confidence to have that person that's already been there. Right. And even now, I mean, we're doing the same type of deals now, my mentor and I, but we still talk and it's more like masterminding now, right? And it's such a productive conversation. It's very different than it was, say, 3 years ago, right? But we can talk about deals. We can talk about marketing that we're doing. We can talk about investor stuff, whatever. And it's just a very different dynamic now because we're operating at similar, places. But early on, somebody looking in like that can immediately, I can ask, it seems like the most simple question. And they just say, well, Whitney, why would you do that? Or what about this? I mean, they just say the most simple thing and it kind of just opens your eyes to something you couldn't have seen otherwise. And, that you think about that ship that gets off 1 degree, right? It just makes the biggest difference when they can just help steer you back in the slightest direction. And I feel like that happens almost weekly or monthly, at least, I was thinking about that daily podcast. So I'll give you an example. And a couple people at a different I was at 2 different conferences I'll never forget, and with people that everybody listening would know, very big names in the real estate business or industry. And both of these people said, Whitney, why would you do that? That's crazy. Why would you do a daily show? That's too much work, And so I went to my mentor, because normally I would just block that out and say, no, we're doing it. But considering who these people were, I thought maybe I should reconsider. My mentor said, Whitney, that's why you have to do it. It's too much work for most people. And that's all I needed. And I was like, okay, now I'm back on track. Other times where, other times where I thought I wasn't going to have the best recordings. I wanted it to be the best I could possibly make it, but it was delaying me from getting started. And he said, he wrote one sentence and all he said was, I recorded an interview with Robert Kiyosaki while sitting in my Toyota Camry. Something that simple, done is better than perfect. Let's get it going. And that was so helpful at that time to help me to just push forward. And that's happened so many times.
Enlightened investors will be right back after this important announcement. I have a big ask that will only take a moment of your time. Ratings and reviews are the lifeblood of our podcast. So to leave a review, iPhone or other Apple iOS device users, go to Apple Podcasts or iTunes. For all you non-Apple device users, go to podchasers.com. On either platform, search for Real Estate Investing Abundance. Once found, please leave a review and a rating. Subscriptions are also vital to our show's success, so please be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. It is free to subscribe, and you can unsubscribe at any time.
It is so difficult to see the big picture when you're down in the trenches. Plus the fact that when you're going through anything for the first time, there's just so many more questions than there are answers, and there's so many avenues that can be the wrong avenue to take. So I can see the importance of a mentor, and cost of a good mentor, I suppose, is worth that. And it certainly has been in your case. Difficult to find. There's so many mentors out there who have tremendously wonderful marketing programs, but I wonder about quality of their mentoring. But you went about it, you networked actually to find the mentor, and you did a lot of networking too before you decided upon the mentor that was the right mentor for you there. Well, Whitney, I could talk with you all day, I'm sure, but we are running out of time here. I know that our viewers and listeners would like to connect with you, so tell us how they can do that.
Of course, Alan. Thank you so much again for the opportunity. Anyone's welcome to connect with me at lifebridgecapital.com. You can receive a free report there on passive investing and things you need to know before you invest in real estate. You can also email me, Whitney, at lifebridgecapital.com, or you can call or text me at 540-585-4338. Would love to help in any way I can.
Well, let's go into our last segment here. So if you would share with us one of your most difficult setbacks, and how did you come through that time, and what did you learn from that experience? And that may or may not be related to the real estate industry or to podcasting.
You know, I think we all go through difficult times at one time or another, right? And they help shape us. One difficult time is definitely losing, a member in our squad when I was overseas. No doubt about it. He and I slept next to each other, in a tent for months, difficult time there, no doubt about it. After that would be those triplexes were very trying on a new marriage and on, my work schedule at the time. And I definitely taught my wife and I a lot. That was definitely a trying time in real estate, specifically. And I'm surprised we even kept going, honestly, but I'm so thankful the Lord gave us the stamina to keep doing it.
For our last question, imagine that you come to the end of your life, and as you lay on your deathbed, what will you look back on with your greatest sense of joy, satisfaction, and fulfillment?
One, that I know the Lord, and no doubt about it, that I know Jesus is my Savior, and my wife does as well. And I pray that my children do as well. I hope that on my deathbed, I know that my children know the Lord as well. But as far as outside of that, or second to that, would be, I hope our foundation has grown and that we've helped, the Lord has just used us to bring hundreds or thousands of children home to their forever families.
Well, Whitney, it has been a pleasure and a delight to have you on the show, and thrilled to get to know you and see you face to face. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you, Alan. My pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Estate Investing Abundance, brought to you by Steve Talker Capital, a company working for passionate professionals like you to develop financial independence built on solid passive real estate investments. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steve Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine. These endeavors attempt to enhance the human treatment of horses worldwide. Steve Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures, great and small, flourish abundantly. For resources to develop your financial independence, connect with us at stevetalker.com.